welcome to a podcast about Cal baseball, where we are going to cover and highlight some of the draft picks from the MLB 2021 MLB draft, specifically those drafted from Cal baseball. My name is Tyler Nunez, and I am brought to you with Justice De Los Santos, who really doesn't need much of an introduction. He's something of a big shot in my eyes, at least. He's a reporter for MLB, formerly from San Jose Mercury, Daily Cal here at Berkeley, NBC, Cron 4. I probably ended up missing something there, but if you want to give yourself a better introduction than I just gave you, go ahead, Justice.
I mean, the only thing that I could say that I had a big shot by is just the imagination, just trying to get my feet wet in the industry. But yeah, I covered the 2019 team. I was able to see a lot of the guys that we're about to talk with today play. It brought back a lot of fond memories about a team that, honestly, in retrospect, I feel like should have gone a little farther than they did, that 2019 team. But it was a nice little experience to, look back on some of these guys and have like a nice little trip down memory lane.
Totally, yeah. I don't know if I don't think they made it out of regionals at that point, did they, in 2019?
Nah, if I remember correctly, they lost to TCU, a TCU team that had kind of underachieved during the regular season, but really caught fire there in the postseason. And then I believe, I don't remember who they played second. I might be making this up. It might be Central Connecticut. It wasn't a Power 5 school, and it was their first win in the College World Series. So I remember that 2019 team. There was this loss to Sacramento State, and I was there for it. They just played really horribly. They caught fire the rest of the way, and I'm thinking, maybe they win a couple games here, maybe they make a little noise, but then bounced in 2 games. They did produce a lot of players that year. If we include that 2019 team, I think it's more than 10 guys from that team that have gotten drafted. Maybe probably more.
And it would have been nice to have any of the 4 guys that got drafted this year out of Cal for 2022. But that is who we're talking about today, is some of the guys from Cal baseball that got drafted in the amateur draft for MLB. And so we'll just go ahead and highlight all of them in the order in which they were drafted. So we'll go ahead and start with Grant Holman, a right-handed pitcher from San Diego, California, drafted by the Oakland Athletics. Justice is actually at the Coliseum right now. I had the pleasure of watching Holman probably much before Justice did, when he was pitching the Little League World Series for a team from Chula Vista in San Diego. I believe they ended up winning the Little League World Series that year. I couldn't tell you which year exactly that was, but yeah, the kid really grew out. He's 6'6", I think pushing around 250, large dude from San Diego. He was drafted in the 6th round, pick 188. That was pretty much a steal for the A's. He was ranked at 138 by MLB.com. So, yeah, do you want to just talk a little bit about Holman?
Yeah, so kind of going back to the 2019 team, just to provide like a little context, is that was a team that featured Andrew Vaughn, who would get drafted number 3 overall, and Corey Lee, he'd also get drafted in the 1st round, Cameron Eden, Jared Horn, Armand Sport, Rogelio Reyes. But even among all those dudes they got drafted, they were all Pac-12, all those dudes, the most interesting player on that team to me by far was Grant Holman, because it's not every day you get to cover that someone that plays 2 ways. And so it was always just constant intrigue in the way that he would go out and pitch one day, go out to hit one day. And, we're kind of saturated with the Shohei Ohtani talk now, but, it's one thing for a professional to do it when it's literally their livelihood, but for a college student to do it and all the preparation that goes into playing on one side of the ball, playing on the other side of the ball. By the time his junior year rolled around, not so much in terms of playing both sides of the ball. I'm not too familiar into the weeds, but I pretty much, from what I saw, by the time his junior year rolled around, he's pretty much just a pitcher. But from what I've been able to see in the time that since I've covered him, he just feels like, as you kind of mentioned, it almost feels like a steal almost. And he feels very toolsy to me in the fact that he can touch 97. He's got the 12-6 curveball. He's got the slider. He's got the splitter. And to me, he's almost one of those guys where and this will kind of be a theme here where you kind of wonder, like, what would his draft stock kind of look like if he was able to have that full last season, because he kind of goes from this guy who was, he did have the two-way stuff as a freshman, but then he, like, his sophomore year essentially gets eliminated, goes out, has a really solid year this year, but then he also has the injury. So he's essentially has a year and a half's worth of numbers in terms of his ability to pitch. And he did kind of show those glimmers. And, you kind of do wonder, it's like, oh, if he was able to truly get that one full season where he's able to put it all together, where would he kind of end up? And in terms of where the A's were able to draft him, I kind of keep echoing what you said. I think it's a steal on their part. I'm really impressed by what he was able to do in the limited time, given that that he did have to manage injury. And I'm really intrigued by how he kind of progresses through their minor league system going forward.
Totally. I mean, yeah, you said he was a two-way player, and I mean, that's as true as it got. In 2020, he started every game for the Bears, either at starting pitcher or at first base. And I just looked up some Little League World Series stats, which are really hard to find, shockingly enough. But in the 2013 Little League World Series, he posted a grand slam, 3-run home run, and a no-hitter in one game. So, I mean, he's had the tools since a young age, I would say. But yeah, I mean, his stats from this year were not pedestrian, but I mean, they weren't what it could have been. He missed a lot of time, like you said, with the shoulder injury, which honestly might have been the reason that a lot of teams slept on him and allowed the A's to get him so late in the 6th round. But I think he is going to end up playing a big role for this team in the future. Something interesting I tried to look up was how many Cal baseball players were drafted by the Oakland A's, because I mean, you got to think scouting's got to be pretty cool. I mean, it's easy. It's right across like a freeway, so you can go check out the guys pretty easily. The last guy that was drafted that made the bigs was Dalton Jeffries. I think he made a start just this year, right? And got his feet wet in the bigs again.
It's honestly like the Oakland Bears out here. It's honestly like the Oakland Bears out here, because you got Bob Melvin, Cal guy, Mark Hanna, Cal guy. Before he signed the deal with Toronto, Marcus Semien, Cal guy. I'm pretty sure there's a litany of other Dalton Jeffries, as you mentioned. It always feels like, just like without fail, you could have like this evergreen tweet. Oakland drafted someone from Cal. Evergreen.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, the A's director of scouting, Eric Kubota, said they strongly believe he's still going to be a starting pitcher for them. I mean, I would project his build to be more of a strong reliever with that, strong bowling ball fastball he has. So he's a really athletic guy, and I could see him performing well for the A's pretty soon. I don't know how fast college guys typically make it up. He was a 3-year starter for the team, so you got to think maybe 1 to 2 years you'll see him, hopefully in Oakland, maybe Las Vegas, who knows, but we'll see.
We're gonna see. One way or the other.
Mm-hmm. All right. But yeah, that'll wrap up talking about Holman a bit, and I guess we'll move on to the next guy that was drafted. Was in the 8th round, 2 rounds later. Pick 223, Sean Sullivan, a right-handed pitcher, went to the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was also a junior from Woodland Hills, California. 6'1", wasn't as projectable with the builds that Holman had. He's a smaller guy, 6'1". I think $185 is what he weighed out at. He wasn't ranked by MLB.com, and signed a little below where his slot was valued at. But I mean, he had a hell of a season with the Bears this year. He was an all Pac-12 honorable mention. He was one of 8 pitchers in the Pac-12 with at least 15 starts, so he was pretty reliable. I mean, Mike New ended up switching up the weekend rotation a bit, just based on who had the hot hand. He got Josh White in there a little later in the season, which who's a sophomore now. But yeah, I mean, he had a pretty good pitch mix. His stats were, very good. 3.68 ERA, 1.28 WHIP, 75 strikeouts, which was the 10th most in Pac-12. And he had the most innings pitched for Cal with 78.1. So do you remember anything about Sullivan during your time here?
I do indeed remember Sean Sullivan. We'll get into this with another person we're going to talk about, but he was one of the many freshmen and there was a lot of young guys who kind of, because of Cal's kind of lack of pitching, they essentially got thrown to the fire. You know, that 2018 team had a lot of guys that were eating up innings. By the time 2019 rolled around, they kind of departed. Aaron Shortridge being one of them among a lot of others. And so a lot of the onus did fall on these young guys to kind of eat up innings. And you kind of look at what like both, well, more so Sullivan than Holman, because Holman he's pretty solid his freshman year. But you know, you kind of look at Sullivan's his numbers from his freshman year is a 5.88 ERA across 28 innings, and it is kind of one of those tricky things when you're trying to project how someone is going to move going forward, because you know it does take a little while to adjust to the college game. It does take a little while to fill into your body, to make the necessary adjustments, because it's one thing to dominate the high school level. It's completely especially at a Power 5 school. But he was kind of another one of those guys where I stepped back and wondered what would his kind of draft stock have looked like if he did have the opportunity to have a sophomore year in addition to his junior. Because like at least with Holman, there was kind of that, has the two-way play, and then he kind of carries that over into his junior year as a starter. But when it comes to Sullivan, you go from this 26 innings as a freshman, doesn't pitch that well, and then you essentially jump to his sophomore year. He has like a 3.68 ERA across 15 starts, really good starter at a Power 5 school. And it's kind of like, okay, what would that kind of look like stock-wise if he was able to have that one more year under his belt?
Yeah, you really got to wonder too with him, because I mean, his 2019 numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story. He was a freshman that was, just like you said, thrown into the fire, like put into pretty high leverage relieving situations. Last year didn't really have much going on with the shortened season, but I mean, he really stepped up this year into a role where he needed to just deliver a lot of innings for the team, like throughout the season. And I mean, his stuff, like I said, it's not the highest ceiling, which is what MLB.com said prior to the draft about his stuff. Like, and I'll just give you the quote: "He might not have the highest ceiling in the world, but college performers who have a chance to be a number 4 type of starter tend to come off the board in day 2." And that was, I believe, true. I believe round 8 was on day 2 as well. So good call by MLB.com there. I think it's pretty accurate. His fastball sits around 90, 91. He can really, if he really wants to reach back, he can hit 95, but you shouldn't be expecting him to be that kind of power guy. But his breaking stuff is honestly pretty gross, and his slider with a lot of control can induce a lot of swings and misses. But I think for the most part, you're looking at a number 4 type of starter guy, and that's not any knock on Sullivan. I mean, he probably will get the call soon with the Pirates, who are in a more rebuilding stage, so he could be a part of the future with this team. I mean, they just picked up some guys via the trade deadline from the Padres, Peter Marcano, and some other prospects, so he could be a part of that rebuilding core moving forward, the way I see it. But
yeah, one of the things that kind of stood out to me about Sullivan as I was kind of looking at his numbers, and again, I wasn't there to kind of watch every start of his on a start-by-start basis, but when you kind of just look at, kind of go into the 3 true outcome numbers, specifically looking at walks and home runs, as a freshman in 26 innings, 16 walks, 6 home runs. You go to his junior year when he was starting. Well, is it junior or would technically be a redshirt sophomore? How did they kind of go about that? Because I know they gave him an extra year.
Yeah, I think it's a redshirt junior, but all like the NCAA gave all of these players an extra year of eligibility because of the COVID season last year. So I think he had 2 more years of eligibility left prior to being drafted this year.
And he got the NCAA is perpetually it's unique for better or worse, but kind of jumping ahead to his numbers. So as I mentioned, 26 innings, 16 walks, 6 home runs. You jump to his third year. Let's just say it's his third year on the team, 78 innings. He cuts those walks down to 22, and he only allows 5 home runs the entire year. If you're a Power 5 guy and you're able to perform and you're able to put up solid numbers, that's going to net on day 2. And that's kind of what going back to the year 2019 specifically, that's kind of what we saw with guys like specifically Jared Horn, who kind of struggled his first 2 years, then puts up, I believe it was like a 2.08 ERA. That's a bit of a more extreme example. Even guys like Julio Reyes, who really struggled, I believe it was his first 3 years, and he puts together a solid season. He's able to get drafted as well. So that's kind of, I kind of want to echo what you're saying in that, if you are a solid Power 5 guy, you're going to get drafted. How exactly he projects to the major league level, that's something that I'd be interested to see, specifically because he's not as toolsy as Holman. But Pirates had a really strong draft, and Sean Sullivan's right in the middle of that.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, that'll wrap up our discussion of the first two guys off the board from Cal. In our next episode, we'll be talking about the last two guys, Ian Villers and Darren Baker. Thank you so much.